body, broken or adorned, mocked or worshipped, placed at the center of a spectacle no one could escape. Part 11. Rome laughs uneasily. Rome had always known how to laugh. From the streets of the Subura to the marble halls of the Palatine, laughter rippled through the empire as easily as wine flowed in its taverns. But under the emperors, laughter became something darker. It was not always joy, nor satire, nor release. It was survival. The empire of Augustus had promised order, stability, the return of peace after civil war. But the reality of imperial rule was stranger. Power had gathered into a single figure, and around him stretched a stage. Senators, generals, priests, and commoners alike were forced to play their roles, and laughter became part of the script. The emperors themselves had often demanded it. Caligula dressed as gods and expected amusement. Nero sang upon the stage while Rome burned, demanding applause as if the empire itself were his audience. Elagabalus drowned guests beneath rose petals, turning death into parody. The palace had become a theater, and the city its unwilling spectators. But Rome's laughter was uneasy. It was the laughter of men who feared to frown, of senators applauding out of terror, of soldiers forced to cheer the absurd. Behind each chuckle was calculation. Laugh too little, and you risk offense. Laugh too loudly, and you risk mockery. Every gesture was a gamble when the emperor was washing. The historian Cassius Dio tells us that he once feigned illness to avoid washing one of Elagabalus' banquets. To sit in that room, Dio knew, was to risk being the butt of a joke or worse, a victim of it. For in the court of the emperor, laughter and cruelty were one. A jest could kill, and yet Rome itself was complicit. Crowds cheered when Nero appeared on stage, even as whispers called him mad. The people thronged to Elagabalus carnivals, dazzled by spectacle, the privately they see. Laughter kept the machine running. It masked humiliation, transformed fear into performance, turned power into parody that everyone could endure at least for a while. There is a Roman phrase that appears again and again in the writings of the time. Risus sardonicus, the sardonic smile. A grin that is not joy, but grimace. A laughter that is half snarl, half submission. This was Rome's expression under emperors who demanded comedy as tribute. But behind the laughter lurks something more dangerous: memory. Romans remembered Sporus, the eunuch bride of Nero, paraded in mockery and humiliation. They remembered the suffocating roses, the poisoned jokes of Elagabalus, the grotesque theatrics of emperors who blurred the line between ruler and clown. These memories did not fade. They lingered in whispers, in satire, in the barbed verses of poets, in the bitter prose of historians. Laughter, after all, can wound. The emperors might have turned Rome into an audience, but the audience never forgot the performance. Nero was remembered not as artist but monster, Elagabalus not as priest but fool. The same laughter that kept them alive on the throne became the echo that damned their names forever. And so Rome laughed uneasily, knowing that power itself was a jest played upon the world, that the empire, for all its grandeur, was fragile, dependent on the whims of boys in silk, men in masks, tyrants in costumes. The Senate bowed, the people cheered, the soldiers marched. But beneath it all, there was always that sardonic grin, that bitter laughter that said, "We know this is absurd. We know this cannot last." Even centuries later, the memory of this uneasy laughter haunted the empire. Historians wrote of it with bitterness, Christians used it as proof of Rome's corruption, and satirists found in it endless fuel. The emperors had tried to command laughter, but in doing so they revealed their weakness. For laughter cannot be owned. It slips free, it lingers, it turns back upon its master. The shadow of Sporus reminds us of this truth. Forced into a parody of marriage, made to embody Rome's anxieties, he became a silent witness to the comedy of power. His suffering was not forgotten. His name became shorthand for Rome's cruelty dressed as theater. Through him, we see how laughter, whether forced, cruel, or uneasy, revealed the empire's deepest fractures. By the end, Rome's uneasy laughter was not simply about emperors. It was about Rome itself, a world power that called itself eternal, that trembled before its own jokes, a society that celebrated strength but was ruled by performance, a people who conquered nations yet bowed before the absurd. And so the empire endured, century after century, its marble monuments gleaming, its armies marching, its laws spreading across the known world. But beneath it all, the sound remained not the roar of triumph, but the uneasy laughter of a people who knew too well the joke of power. Rome laughed uneasily, and in that laughter we glimpse its Part 12. The young priest emperor. In the long parade of emperors, few stood out as strangely, as brilliantly, or as tragically as the boy priest from Syria, Elagabalus. His reign lasted barely 4 years, but in that brief span he turned Rome into a theater of gods, carnivals, and scandal. He was emperor, high priest, and spectacle all at once. When the legions proclaimed him in 218 AD, he was little more than a child, barely 14, yet draped in silk, crowned with diadems, carrying the sacred black stone of his god Alagibal. The soldiers of the East adored him not for his military strength, not for his statesmanship, but for his youth, his beauty, and the aura of divinity he carried. To them he was more than emperor. He was chosen, sanctified, anointed. Rome, however, did not see divinity. Rome saw an outsider. The Syrian boy entered the eternal city not with the martial sternness of a Caesar, but with the theatrical pomp of a priest-king. His processions overflowed with incense, jewels, and song. His god, Alagibal, was lifted above Jupiter himself. The Senate, proud guardians of Roman tradition, were forced to bow before a foreign stone. At first, curiosity softened judgment. Romans had long flirted with Eastern cults. The mysteries of Isis, the rites of Mithras, the visions of Cybele. But Elagabalus went further. He demanded not just tolerance but supremacy. The gods of Rome were gathered into his temple, their sacred relics placed under the dominion of his Syrian son. For a city built upon tradition, this was no mere novelty. It was sacrilege. The emperor himself embodied this rupture. He danced as priest in public, clad in silks rather than armor. He painted his face, wore jewelry, and performed rites in the manner of the East. To many, he seemed less emperor than actor, less ruler than parody. Yet Elagabalus was no fool. He understood that power was theater, and he leaned into it fully. His palace became a stage where Rome's elite were forced to wash and endure his performances. Banquets were transformed into spectacles. Desks crushed under cascades of rose petals, senators mocked with false feasts of wax and stone, nobles humiliated under the guise of entertainment. Here the line between cruelty and comedy blurred. Death came wrapped in beauty, power disguised as jest. Elagabalus ruled not with the sword, but with the joke. And in this, he revealed something deeply Roman, that power was never secure unless it was performed. But the emperor's theater went further still. Like Nero before him, Elagabalus challenged Rome's deepest anxieties about the body and gender. He married a Vestal virgin, shattering taboo. He called men his husbands, parading them before the city. He wore women's clothing, demanded to be addressed as mistress, even asked physicians to alter his body. The young priest-emperor made himself into a living scandal, a walking parody of Rome's values. It was more than decadence. It was provocation. For in Elagabalus, Rome saw its nightmares reflected: the collapse of tradition, the invasion of the foreign, the blurring of the masculine ideal upon which empire claimed to stand. And yet, Rome could not look away. The emperor was both horror and fascination. His reign was a carnival that the city hated and secretly craved. But such carnivals cannot last. The praetorians grew restless, senators humiliated, the people exhausted. By 222 AD, whispers had hardened into conspiracy. The soldiers who once hailed him now turned. In a palace coup, Elagabalus was seized. His mother clung to him, but both were dragged through the streets, beaten, stripped, slaughtered. His body, once adorned in silk and jewels, was cast into the sewers, then into the Tiber. Rome washed its hands of the boy priest-emperor, and yet he was not erased. His name lingered in scandal, his memory preserved as both monster and Christian writers would point to him as proof of pagan corruption. Historians painted him as caricature. Satirists found in him endless fuel. But beneath all the mockery lies a truth. Elagabalus, more than many emperors, exposed the fragile theater upon which Rome's empire stood. For what was Rome, if not performance? The Senate in its togas, the generals in their triumphs, the emperors on their thrones, all were actors on a stage, bound to ritual and spectacle. Elagabalus did not invent this truth. He merely exaggerated it, stripping away the mask of dignity and replacing it with comedy. In him, we see the legacy of Sporus, the eunuch bride of Nero, forced into parody, used as symbol. Elagabalus, too, made the empire confront its anxieties through theater written on the body. In their stories, humiliation and laughter became tools of power. Rome laughed uneasily because Rome recognized itself. And so, the young priest-emperor remains one of history's strangest rulers. A boy who tried to make Rome bow to his god. A youth who turned the empire into his carnival. A monarch who revealed, more clearly than most, that empire itself was always a performance. In the end, his reign was short, his life cruelly ended, his memory twisted. But the laughter he provoked, the scandal he embodied, the fear he evoked, these survived. For in Elagabalus, Rome glimpsed its own truth, that beneath the marble, the legions, and the laws, the empire was a theater where power was fragile, where rulers played at gods, and where laughter could be as deadly as the sword. The boy was gone, but the stage remained, and Rome, eternal and uneasy, prepared for the next act. Part 13. A temple of blood. Rome called itself eternal. Its marble monuments rose like mountains, its legions marched like iron rivers, its laws carved order into the world. But beneath the stone and ceremony, beneath the triumphal arches and gilded palaces, lay a truth that the empire could never fully conceal. Rome was a temple built on blood. Every triumph carried its shadow. When a general rode in procession through the streets, crowned with laurel, slaves followed whispering in his ear, "Remember, you are mortal." Yet even this ritual humility was part of the theater, a performance meant to hide the truth. The empire's victories were soaked in death, its order maintained by cruelty. The emperors knew this better than anyone, for each stood at the center of a cult, worshipped as more than man, feared as more than mortal. To sit upon the throne was to be both priest and sacrifice. Julius Caesar bled upon the Senate floor, Augustus draped his power in ritual, Nero turned the palace into a stage, Elagabalus into a shrine. All were variations on the same theme, that Rome's power demanded offerings, and the offerings were always bodies. Sporus, the eunuch bride, mutilated and paraded. The senators humiliated in games of parody. The banqueters suffocated beneath roses, laughing until they died. Soldiers crucified in rows, rebels torn apart by beasts, slaves executed to amuse the crowd. Rome was never content with silent obedience. It needed spectacle. Its theater was written in flesh. The Colosseum, that most enduring monument of Rome, was itself a temple of blood. From its arches poured rivers of death, men against men, beasts against men, flames, steel, and sand. The people roared, senators smiled, emperors waved, and beneath it all, the empire reaffirmed itself through slaughter. To watch was to participate, to cheer was to consent, and yet, even here, laughter intruded. The gladiatorial games were not solemn sacrifices but carnivals. Death was paired with mockery, pain with parody. Criminals were dressed as mythic heroes before their execution. Prisoners forced to reenact legends of Troy or Hercules only to die at the climax, their deaths the punchline. Rome fused comedy and cruelty until they were indistinguishable. That is the legacy we have traced, the uneasy laughter of empire. From Nero's marriage to Sporus, to Domitian's palace of fear, to Elagabalus suffocating roses, the pattern is the same. Rome turned the body into symbol, into stage, into offering. It mocked what it feared, humiliated what it could not control, and called it entertainment. But in doing so, it revealed its own fragility, for the temple of blood was not eternal. Its stones cracked, its rituals faltered, its gods faded. The same laughter that once sustained the emperors turned against them in memory. Nero remembered as clown, Elagabalus as fool, Domitian as tyrant. Their attempts to control the stage became their damnation. Sporus remains the clearest emblem of this truth. Forced into parody, he outlived Nero, survived emperors, haunted the empire as living reminder. Rome could destroy bodies, but it could not erase the memory of what it had done. His name became a whisper, an echo of cruelty dressed as ceremony, of humiliation made sacred. And so, when we look upon Rome today, its broken forums, its fallen columns, its ruins bathed in evening light, we see not only grandeur, but the shadow of its temple of blood. We see the empire's uneasy laughter, its cruel spectacles, its fragile stage. We remember that beneath the marble was always the flesh. Rome lasted for centuries. It reshaped the world. Its laws echo still, its roads still scar the land, its language survives in half the world's tongues. But behind all its monuments lies a darker inheritance, the truth that power, unrestrained, turns always to theater and sacrifice, that laughter can be a weapon, that humiliation can bind an empire as tightly as fear. The temple of blood is gone, but its lessons remain. Rome was eternal only in this, that every empire in the end is built on bodies, and every throne, no matter how gilded, is a stage. Part 14. Empire in revolt. Rome was vast, but Rome was never calm. Beneath the triumphs and marble, the empire seethed. Rebellion was as constant as conquest. Provinces rose, legions mutinied, cities defied, emperors were unmade not by barbarians, but by their own. The myth of eternal order was always fragile. Rome claimed to be mistress of the world, yet her grasp slipped whenever her rulers faltered. Every crack in the throne opened the door to revolt. The memory of Nero's fall still lingered. The Senate declared him an enemy of the state, the Praetorians abandoned him, the people deserted him. In his place rose Galba, Otho, Vitellius, emperors of a single year, each proclaimed by soldiers, each cut down by soldiers. This year of the 4 emperors revealed the truth. Rome's fate did not lie with the Senate, nor even the people.